Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next Forex Gaming Podcast. This is going to be episode 2 for this podcast we've got going on here for the Forex subreddit. My name is Sabouts. I am a Forex gaming YouTuber. I do other strategy gaming things on my channel. For this topic, we're going to be doing the general state of the Forex gaming in the last couple of years, this time with a more heavier emphasis on land-based Forex games. I'm joined by several other members of the Forex gaming subreddit. If you guys would like, you can go and take a second to introduce yourself so everybody knows who you are and where you hail from.
Hey, I'm Combat Wombat. I'm kind of a fixture of the Space Empires 4 modding community from the United States. You know, I think my two favorite Forex games are Civ 4 and Space Empires 4. I guess I get fixated on that 4 for some reason.
Hey, that makes sense too, considering it's 4X. I'm Devil Dog FF, or Orcas or Dolphins on the subreddit, and I've been with 4X for as long as I can remember. I'm kind of obsessed. I started the website Explominate and have subsequently left because I hate managing a website. But my favorite 4X games are probably, honestly, Endless Legend and Ascendancy. Maybe we can talk about Ascendancy a little bit later. But yeah, those are probably my two favorite games, and I'm just happy to be here. Drexy?
Hi, I'm Drexy from the UK, and I don't have such impressive credentials as the rest of the guys, but I love 4Xs too. My favourite 4Xs of all time are Sword in the Stars and Distance World.
Hi, I'm Kirkus 23 on the subreddits. I've played 4X games since I dug Master of Orion 2 out of the bargain bin of my local computer store. And my favorite all-time would probably Master of Orion 2, possibly with some massively rose-tinted goggles, and Civilization 4.
I'm Strat, Strategia. I honestly have no idea what my first 4X game was, but the first ones I like seriously played were probably Civ 3 and Space Empires 4. And I'm Dutch, by the way. It's which, you know, if it wasn't obvious already.
And he loves gold.
I love gold.
Yes, I know. I love it.
No, I have no idea what I'd pick for a favorite 4X game. I've played a lot over the years, and I have no idea what the number one favorite would be. Although Space Empires 4 is still a good contender for that.
I know we're supposed to be talking about land-based games, but Ascendancy gets mentioned so very rarely in 4X discussions, and it is kind of one of those hidden gems.
Yes.
Yes, I love it. Yes, no, Ascendancy was so amazing. You know what it did that I really appreciated was it allowed for each race to have a very specific and asymmetric power that it could use, and depending on what power it was, it could be used every 5 turns, every 400 turns. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but they were all at various lengths, and some of them were just passive, abilities too. And it just made each game feel very different. And then the music was ahead of its time. I don't know if you guys remember the music of Ascendancy, but holy crap. And each of the races had their own specific music. It's something that I'll never forget. It's one of my favorite games.
Yeah, it did a good job with the immersion. And the other interesting thing it did is that there were no humans, which is also pretty rare for that time. So you actually had to pick something weird.
Yeah, and each of them were equally weird. There wasn't anyone that felt particularly normal. They were, I think there was 15 races. There was a lot of races, and each of them, the actual visual representation of them was unique. And like I said, the abilities were unique. The looks, their ship looks, all of the stuff. And as you started each game, there's a nice little backstory to each of them. And I mean, there could have been a lot more, but obviously this game was, I want to say, early to mid-90s, so you had limitations there, but Ascendancy was amazing. So I guess we could talk about the actual subject now.
Actual subject, general state of 4X gaming in the last couple of years, this time with a heavier emphasis on land-based games. I'm going to say that starting off kind of with the topic here, I actually, for land-based, I mean, we talked a little bit about it last time. Endless Legend, I think, really nailed it. perfectly in the last couple years for land-based. Other than that, there hasn't been a lot of land-based 4X games. It's mainly been a lot of space 4X games.
Well, okay, so I will say that you and I, and maybe possibly some people here, are in the like I said, I think in the last episode, I really think Endless Legend splits the demographic, and there was a recent post on the subreddit that really kind of illustrated that, because there was like the title was off. It was like, I don't get it. Like, this isn't really all that deep. And like, there were a lot of people that agreed with them, to the point where I was getting really angry.
Oh, well, I might make you angry.
I knew it. I knew there was going to be somebody that was going to do it, because I know that there is a hit and miss element to Endless Legend. So tell us why you don't really like it, Drexy.
Oh, man. Everything about that game says to me I should really love this game. But for some reason, I've never been able to get into it. I just can't put my finger on why I don't like it. I'm not sure if it's like the quests you have to do, or the winter phase, or I don't know. Everything screams you should love this game, but I've never actually been able to dig into it and really get my teeth into it. I don't hate it as such, but there's just some sort of barrier for me that I've never been able to get over.
Well, you're obviously not the only one.
Yeah, I've got like exactly the same thing. Like I want to love it, but it just doesn't want to click for some reason. It's a great game. I mean, I can recognize that it's a great game. It's really thought out, very very deep lore, very some innovative gameplay mechanics. With the winter phase is awesome. I like the quests that give you some direction on what to do. The minor factions. I even like the tactical combat, which is apparently also sort of a controversial subject, but it doesn't really want to. It's sort of weird, and I can't really get into it to the degree that I could get into other 4X games like Civ, for instance, like Civ 6, which shared a lot of the same gameplay elements, and I don't know why, and I wish I did.
I do see. I enjoy the game myself, but I do see where there is a certain weirdness to it. Amplitudes had generally done things in a slightly different way, and they really took it pretty far in Endless Legend, where they took a lot of the 4X conventions and kind of put them on their head. And that can definitely cause some disconnect for a lot of people.
I know there's seems to be around turn 60 to 70, there's like a sudden shift in the game. We start getting attacked and stuff like that. So I don't know, maybe it's that phase where the game sort of shifts, where maybe I'm not ready for it to shift, maybe.
There's a point there. You can definitely, a lot of games, there's a kind of a gradual ramp up towards conflict. There's that expansion phase, and then your borders are touching, and then you start fighting over stuff. But because of the way the regions work in Endless Legend, you end up having borders touching a lot sooner than you might initially just understand how close they are, and the fighting probably comes a lot more suddenly.
Yeah, I can understand that, but it's one of those games for me where I want to shout it from the rooftops about how awesome it is. I was really lucky enough to kind of come on as a VIP with Amplitude right around the time that they started their beta with Endless Legend, and I admit, like, at first I didn't like Endless Legend. I was like, man, this is a game that I should love because the factions are cool. They actually reminded me a lot of Ascendancy. Like, they were so asymmetric and alien at some level that I was just like, man, this is a game I should love. And I played like 40 hours of it, and I kind of just let it go for a while. And it wasn't until, I think, the Guardians expansion that I came back to it and really gave it its first go. And I fell in love with it. And then with each subsequent expansion, they've taken what I thought worked best for Amplitude, which was, that weird French, like, I don't know, flavor to it, like this very unique take on 4X, and they just ran with it. And with the Shifters expansion and even the newest Tempest expansion, I think they've nailed it out of the park. Endless Legend is, I mentioned it at the beginning, it's one of my favorite games of all time. So I personally am so distressed when I see people are like, yeah, screw that game, it's not deep, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you guys don't know my baby like I do.
Well, I bought the Tempest expansion this week, so maybe I should give it another go.
And we actually do have I'm looking at my Steam list here in terms of land-based 4X games. We have games like Fallen Enchantress, Age of Wonders, and some games like that if people want to talk about those. Also, Warlock is the other one, another big one.
Fear the Awakening was another one that came out. Yeah. And another one that's not as popular is Pandora First Contact.
Oh, and on that too, Beyond Earth. And, as we're listing a lot of these games, I think a lot of them are actually more controversial than some of the better Space 4X games. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Sabouts, I haven't heard from you in a little bit. Tell us what you think is one of the better land-based 4X other than Endless Legend. Because I know you just loved, because you have to.
I mean, I enjoy Endless Legend, but it's actually, I had to agree with Drexy to a certain extent with that one. I don't want to keep beating up Endless Legend, but I just wanted to say that I actually own the game with pretty much all the expansions except the most recent one that came out. But I think I've never actually done a series on it on my channel. And I think I've maybe only got 4 or 5 hours into the game. And it's not that it's not a good game. The game is super interesting and entertaining, but I don't know why. But for some reason, it just never dug its claws into me very well. And I do plan on at some point really getting into it, but it's just been something I keep putting on the back burner and playing other games without actually visiting it. And I keep saying every time a new expansion comes out that I'm going to come back to it, but I never do.
Well, do you think terrestrial 4X is like Space 4X is all measured between them and Masters of Orion? Do you think Civ has any holdings over how good a terrestrial 4X should be?
They do seem to be the kind of the benchmark of terrestrial 4X games, at least the Civilization series. I mean, I'd probably include Distant Worlds and Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri in that group as well.
Yeah, and I think that you start to... So, I mean, if we go back to like the meaning of 4X, which we can do on another episode, but like the actual term 4X was started with Master of Orion, and it was some dude from PC Gamer or something who was like, let's say this, and 4X started, and I think that's why the majority of Space 4X games tend to have maybe not better ratings, but they seem to get better followings because they kind of follow the model that Master of Orion set way back when, and then like land-based 4X games never really found, like they had Master of Magic, they had Civilization, but beyond those two, they haven't really had anything really until recently. And that's where I think
the Age of Wonders series has been going on for some time.
So I'd argue the Age of Wonders isn't actually 4X, but we can again.
What? Well, I was going to say Age of Wonders was one of my favorite terrestrial 4Xs, but obviously not now.
Well, again, it's something that we could talk about one day, and I think everyone's definition of 4X game is slightly different. I think Age of Wonders 3 is actually pretty 4Xy, but the first 2 or 3 weren't really all that 4Xy. But that's another day. But no, if you think about it, there hasn't been many land-based 4X games that have really set the tone for how future or nowadays present land-based 4X games should be. So I think that's part of the problem is Civilization is such a juggernaut, and then Master of Magic was so long ago that it wasn't until recently that these things started to come together, and a lot of them are being done by indie game developers that really just don't have the skill to make a good 4X. But there have been some good ones. Is anybody a big fan of Beyond Earth?
So
Beyond Earth? Sorry.
So Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri is one of my favorite land-based 4X games. So hearing about Beyond Earth, I was just hoping that they're going to do it justice. And then I played it during one of their free weekends, and I never bothered looking back.
Yeah, it was the same with me. I played during the free weekend on Steam, and I'm like, why would I want to keep playing this? I feel like I experienced everything in the free weekend. It was just a really shallow game.
Yeah, I'm pretty glad you guys got to play it during the free weekend. I actually was one of the unlucky people who pre-ordered the game expecting a lot more than I actually got. It's actually one of the only games I've ever pre-ordered and it came around and bit me pretty good. And it was a huge disappointment, I think, especially being that Alpha Centauri is definitely one of my most favorite land-based 4X games. And so I understand that when they came into it, they kept saying over and over that it wasn't an Alpha Centauri reboot. But I mean, it's pretty obvious that the game took a lot of inspiration from Alpha Centauri. And I didn't necessarily go into Beyond Earth expecting Alpha Centauri necessarily. But at the same time, I just expected a lot more than what I got. And then when they released the expansion, and then it just felt like after that they were kind of like, all right, Civ 6, we're done. We're not going to touch that again. And it's almost like they just wanted to pretend that it never happened. It was super disappointing.
Yeah, what bothered me too is that Rising Tide was actually really good. I mean, it took a below mediocre game and actually made it good. And I think that's a pretty big feat considering, just how high my expectations were for the original base game. But Rising Tide actually did a lot for it, and I was just really hopeful that they'd just knock it out of the park with one more expansion, but they just gave up, and that sucks.
Yeah, probably 'cause at that point, when it first came out, it really did feel Beyond Earth really did feel like Civ 5 in space. They were too sort of shackled to Civ 5, and it was too obvious that they based the whole game on Civ 5 much more than Alpha Centauri. It came after Civ 2. But it's not, it stands on its own. Like it's not, it's got some elements from Civ 2, but it has enough of its own unique stuff that it completely stands outside of the main Civilization series. And Beyond Earth really, it's too heavily based on Civ.
Yeah, I think the other thing, especially for me with Alpha Centauri being what it was, having played that free weekend on Steam, I remember, okay, I want to play the science guys, because in Alpha Centauri, you played the University of Planet. The entire identity revolves around research and what that means philosophically and as a society. And when you start Beyond Earth, you're like, oh, I pick the science perk, and then I guess I'm going to be Space France, and my friends are going to be Space Brazil, and I don't remember anything about any other faction in that game, including my own.
Yeah, I could actually. I've been talking about Alpha Centauri and Beyond Earth to one of my friends recently, and I could go on at length about what made Alpha Centauri great and why the Pandora First Contact and Beyond Earth, like the two major sort of recent spiritual successors, why they didn't work in the same way. But you probably don't want to listen to my accent for 30 minutes on end. So.
Oh, as long as you talk about gold, I'm all right.
I actually want to bring up Pandora First Contact. That game, I think, recently had a pretty massive update. Well, by recent, I guess within the last year, it had a pretty massive update. But I've heard that Pandora First Contact is actually a pretty good 4X game and a very similar Alpha Centauri reboot. But other than that, I just don't know if the game actually got as much spotlight as maybe some other titles did, like Beyond Earth. Has anybody actually? I own Pandora First Contact. I haven't played it. I own a lot of games I haven't played. But has anybody actually played Pandora First Contact?
Yes.
Yeah, I played it a fair bit. One thing about Alpha Centauri that also doesn't get mentioned is the artistry that goes into making that game. That game is, for its time, beautiful. The effects that play after research, the voice acting, the film clips is one of those games that makes me want to say games can be art. Pandora does not, unfortunately, being the smaller indie studio that it is, didn't have the resources to do that. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I don't know what's going on with the AI in Pandora, but unless you play within a very specific margin, the AI, even the easiest difficulty setting, will dogpile and kill you right away.
I read, and I think one of the patch notes or one of the expansion notes maybe, that they have actually toned that down so that the AI is less likely to dogpile you. So that's one of the things. But yeah, I agree that the art style is it's not the actual game map is it looks pretty nice aesthetically, but like the characters look lifeless, and the animations are So it's they got part of the way there, but it definitely is a pretty good game in its own right, and it does deserve more attention. But it's it doesn't really get that Alpha Centauri. It doesn't hit the same notes as it does, because Alpha Centauri. I'm gonna go into it a little bit. Like one of the what made that so great is the complete package. Like everything just fit in Alpha Centauri. Everything belonged. Like the story, the gameplay, the graphical design, the actions you took, the social engineering, the unit design, everything was just one complete whole, and everything worked together. And these two spiritual successors, like they've taken some of the elements from Alpha Centauri, but just taking some of these elements, they're not taking the whole package. So they're sort of copying what Alpha Centauri did, but they're losing what made that so great. Like the parts they are adapting, standing on their own, they're not nearly as great as they were in Alpha Centauri, because they don't have the sort of backup from the entire rest of the package.
I think the other thing with Pandora is after it was first released, there was a mod, I believe his name was Al, who started modding the game, and because he did such good work with the mod, they actually employed him to do the expansion. So the expansion isn't done by the devs, it's actually done by one of the bigger modders for the game. So I think probably because it didn't hit the first time round, maybe it got ignored once the expansion came out, which, from what I've heard, improved the game quite a lot. I've only played it a little bit, so I'm not an expert on it.
Yeah, it actually was a lot better with that expansion. And I think his main work was on the AI, and the AI is significantly better. In fact, you can go back now, and someone who's, a relative veteran with 4X games will get trounced with that AI. It's smart. It's really smart. And that guy, he's actually moved on to work with the Dominus Galaxia guys. And if that's not a game you've heard of yet, it will be, because it's going to have a Kickstarter soon. But Dominus Galaxia is like a true reboot of Master of Orion 1. And it's like really taking it into the 21st century with like super awesome graphics and blah, blah, blah. But that guy that worked on the Pandora expansion and worked on the AI, he's now moved on to the Dominus Galaxia project. So that's a game you should definitely keep an eye on. But I was kind of curious, has anyone really sunk any time into Fallen Enchantress or Fallen Enchantress Legendary Heroes?
I've put some. I wouldn't say I've put loads. Yeah, that and Sorcerer King. Again, Stardock seems to have done a stream of games off that sort of concept, although Sorcerer King is quite different. I enjoyed it. I know you enjoyed it, and I actually enjoyed Sorcerer King as well, but it didn't seem to take off with anyone else.
Yeah, I'm one of those fools, with all due respect to Stardock. I was one of those fools that bought the collector's edition of Elemental before it came out, and it was one of the worst amount of money that I've ever spent in my whole life, and it has taught me a very important lesson about pre-ordering. But it's funny, because years later, just a couple years ago, I ended up having Brad Wardell sign it because I met him. And I was like, hey, can you sign this? Because I bought this. And even he laughed at me. But I like the Elemental series of games is a series that I want to like, because I appreciate the unit customization, and I actually really appreciate the way cities are developed. If you guys aren't familiar with the way cities are developed in the Elemental series, they actually they build out horizontally, much like Civilization sort of does now, but back in the day, Elemental was doing it way before then. And I think it's really cool, because once you get towards the end of the game, you can see an Elemental city, and it just looks pretty awesome. You can zoom in and see the people working, and as you've built these progressively cooler buildings and stuff, it just looks magical and very big, and I think that's really cool. So there's a lot of things that I thought they were doing really well with the Elemental series, but they've always fallen short of greatness. They're good, but they're not great, and I think that's why they've never really taken off.
I've never actually played the Elemental series games. I mean, it sounds like it's a pretty neat game. What exactly about it was a particular thing that you just didn't like?
I think there's a level of polish that is sadly lacking from Stardock games the last couple of years, the last 10 years. You could probably go back to Galactic Civilizations 2 and with the last two expansion packs. And since then, I feel like everything Stardock did was sort of like on the coattails of that. And then they finally started to maybe figure out like that's not what we can do anymore. We can't ride their coattails. So I think what it is that they had a lot of good ideas. Like the original Elemental game had dynasties. Like we were talking about stuff like Crusader Kings 2, but it was already doing that way before Crusader Kings and Crusader Kings 2. And it sort of worked. In fact, that was one of the coolest parts of Elemental, the original. But a lot of the other stuff sucked. Like everything about 4X games wasn't really there, and the factions were pretty much the same, and there was just a lot of things that didn't, like in the bugs. Oh man, the polish level was awful. And then they kind of fixed a little bit of that with Fallen Enchantress, which was a standalone expansion that everybody who bought Elemental got. And then if you got Elemental at the very beginning, you actually got both Fallen Enchantress and Fallen Enchantress Legendary Heroes for free, which was, I think, a really cool thing. But Fallen Enchantress kind of started to bring in some polish. It added some really cool map features. It started to do some stuff with the world that really wasn't there with Elemental, like adding like super bosses and just fleshing things out, adding like a cool quest system. The original quest system was really dumb. They made it sort of much more like a RPG quest system. And then Legendary Heroes took that idea even further, and they started adding this, I forgot what the system was, but basically there's a system involved where you started gaining heroes, and just for the most part, the systems in place were cool. They just weren't polished at all, and they were buggy as all hell too.
As much as you may have buyer's remorse, you're talking to someone who bought for $30 Master of Orion 3.
I'm so sorry.
Well, okay, so I obviously didn't learn my lesson back then too, because I did the same thing.
That was so sad. I don't want to talk about it.
I remember sitting on my computer, my like 486 Pentium or whatever it was back then, and like forcing myself to play that game because I was like, "There's got to be something here. I've got to find what I love about this game sometime." Yeah, I never did.
Didn't that development studio that made that game pretty much just stop existing after that?
Yeah,
correct.
Oh yeah, I hope. Yeah, I hope with no loss of life, I hope everything exploded.
Wow.
I can't blame you. I just don't understand what on earth they were thinking when they're doing this. It was an unfinished, buggy mess, and even from the design docs, it couldn't have made any sense.
Yeah, that's easily. I mean, like that's like our Daikatana. You know, like I look back on the history of 4X games, and nearly everyone can be like, "Oh, remember that? That one sucked."
There is, I think, I found deep inside somewhere where there's an interesting game there, but it's so buggy, it's so impossible to actually control because the AI will you will give commands and the AI will be immediately ripped away from you and will do whatever it wants as soon as you're not looking, and it makes it completely unplayable.
Yeah, I think that like high level stuff that they were trying to do would have worked if they had like really stuck with it. Back to land-based, I was hoping that we briefly spoke about Sorcerer King. Did anybody play Sorcerer King at least?
I did, yeah. Which, would you class it as a 4X, really?
I think it has some serious 4X elements.
Right, because it is like Fallen Enchantress remixed, kind of.
Yeah, and I think it actually attempted like a new 4X genre. And, you know, going back to the subreddit, there was a really cool post where I got absolutely zero traction. But there was a cool post about how Sorcerer King actually attempted to make like a new 4X genre, and it just failed miserably, which I don't know if it failed miserably because I really enjoyed it, but I do think it failed to reach mass appeal because, yet again, there's that whole Stardock thing. Poor guys.
Well, the biggest issue really is the replayability as well. Another game that we've barely mentioned was Theod Awakening, which also did a lot of new stuff for 4X games. Do anyone play that?
Eerie silence.
I never played the Awakening, actually. I always thought I was going to, but I didn't. I see that there's a second one coming out. I'm actually pretty excited for that one because I guess it's going to have multiplayer, which the first one didn't.
Yeah. Okay, so if we eventually get to a list of games that we hate that most people like, Thea's going to be mine.
Oh, okay.
There is a burning hatred for micromanagement in my soul, and that game, wow, you want to and like everything has to be micromanaged, and I'm not a big fan of that.
Is it like a bad kind of micromanagement, or because I know some games do micromanagement good, but it's possible. I mean, I enjoy micromanagement, but I wouldn't like it if it wasn't done correctly.
That's subjective. I don't know what Drexy will say, and I'd love to hear his opinion, but for me, I think it's because it is an indie studio that created that game, and the UI wasn't like the most pleasant thing to look at ever. And so a lot of the things, because what it involves is basically like sending out search parties and, I don't know, like hunter-gatherer parties to like, take care of this one surviving city that's, surviving the apocalypse or whatnot. And a lot of what that involves is like supplying them and making sure they're equipped, and then making sure that all the stuff they bring back you can use, and divvying that up to everybody, and then also making sure you have all the stuff that you need to use to craft stuff. And it's just, there's a lot going on, and the UI isn't my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you. Having to manage your city with all the crafting and stuff, yeah, it does sort of slow the game down maybe. But I did think it was a lot of interesting ideas they brought to the table. The combat being totally different to anything 4X games have done, which was basically a card game. But, I mean, for a small studio, they sold pretty well. I think possibly, hopefully, if they change some stuff there too, could be really, really good.
There's a certain level of polish, I guess, that people have very wildly different tolerances for. As many people discovered to their dismay, I'm not the hugest fan of Distant Worlds for that reason. And again, with that kind of micromanagement, the UI can definitely make or break someone's opinion of it.
Well, like I said, my two favourite games are Distance World and Sword in the Stars 1. There's no such thing as 2. Both of those games' UIs are not the greatest.
Actually, I wouldn't say that Sword in the Stars has the worst UI. It has a lot of slider-based stuff, and it's not too bad. There's a few modal things that are kind of weird in terms of what escape keys do and stuff. That's not great, but, not terrible. I've definitely seen worse. And the tactical combat where Sword in the Stars really comes into its own is pretty well done.
Yeah. Sword of the Stars 1 was, in my opinion, they abstracted it a bit too much with, like, for what you said of the sliders and everything. It's really focused much more heavily on the actual combat, and the planet management was basically just reduced to a couple of to a few stats and a couple of sliders. And I do still like the game a lot, but I didn't really like that aspect of it. It was a bit too simplified. Sword of the Stars 2 is a bit unfortunate. Like it did have the potential to be a great game, and the developers wanted it to be a great game, but the publisher forced them to release early, and that's what caused all the problems. So
that game just makes me so sad, and that's the last game I ever pre-ordered as well. Graphically it looks so much good considering how bad Sword and Stars 1's graphics are, but yeah, I think they just tried to do too much and it was released too early. I did actually this week go and see how the mod scene was doing, and someone has done a speed up mod, but from what I can guess is they didn't really add good enough mod support, so it's actually really hard to mod the game.
Yeah, from what I read, like the developers, they wanted to take another about a year or so of development time before the game was fully ready, but their publisher put pressure on them, and so when it was actually released, when it was actually released, they did spend I think a year and a half or so, 2 years maybe. I'm not sure exactly how long. continuing development post-release until it was in a position where they were more satisfied with it. But the damage had been done. It already had the name of being what it is. And at that point, I think that, well, I'm not sure if mod support was ever really a big priority for them. I don't think it was really a big priority for Sword of the Stars 1 as well, but I may be mistaken. It's a long time ago. But it's at that point, it was probably difficult to justify spending a lot of time and effort making it more moddable when they were just still trying to get the base game itself to a state where they were satisfied with it.
Well, this game just, I think the biggest problem was I think they were actually under contract still from Paradox. So they kind of had to just like chug along and get those patches out. But it seems to me when anyone from the community asked either Paradox or Kerberos, is it, to change stuff, they kind of blamed each other. They were in this like blaming match between each other, and it just ruined what that game could be, really.
Let's talk Dominions. So I'm a huge Dominions fan. I probably have one of like 10 Dominions 3 t-shirts in existence, and I wear it way too often. Dominions 4 was out recently. Well, okay, like 3 or 4 years ago now. Great. I mean, just built on everything Dominions 3 had and just made it better. What does everyone else think about Dominions 4?
Oh my God, I love Dominions 4. But actually, I'd like to turn it over to Tortuga here. He actually joined us recently. And if you'd like, Tortuga, you can go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Dominions 4 because I know you enjoy it as well.
Thanks, Sabouts. Yeah, I'm Tortuga Power. I guess a little bit about me. I might be known because I have a content creation channel just like Sabouts. And Dominions 4 is actually something that Sabouts and I will be talking a lot about in our channel upcoming since we're doing a multiplayer series on it. But to the game itself, man, it's one of those rare games where you can play it as a beginner and enjoy it, but it has like immense depth, so which is another huge positive to it, that you learn more about the magic spells, and it's one of those easy to learn, hard to master games that I have like almost no negative things to say about it.
None, not even one negative thing.
Well, let's not look at the graphics too closely if we want to think about one way it could be improved.
You basically have to close your eyes to get over the graphics.
Yeah, a lot of that's, preference for a lot of people. Some people really enjoy flashy graphics. I've always seemed to see a pattern in when a game has a lot more graphics, it does seem to lack a lot more in depth. I don't know if maybe that's just because it shifts the developer's attention away from actually working and improving on game mechanics. But, when you take a game like, say, Master of Orion 3, where they completely tried to work on bringing the Master of Orion genre into the 3D world and then completely neglected pretty much anything that made the game actually good. It was pretty much just a virtual simulator, and it was awful at it. Dominions 4 really shines on the fact that the developers didn't really worry that much about graphics. It was just all about gameplay material, the replayability, adding all these different races in. I mean, if you take the fact that there's an early age, middle age, a late age, and all 3 ages have their own races, like a large list of races, and they all have different magical abilities. They've all got different types of units. It's actually pretty impressive how deep the game actually runs.
Yeah, I mean, you can play Dominions 4 100 times, and you're still not going to get the full experience.
Yeah, I've only played it once, and that was just before Christmas, so I need to get back into it. But that does another interesting thing with the ages, where the later ages are less magic, am I right? And the earlier ages have much more magic, which I guess changes the gameplay between the ages quite a bit.
Yeah, it actually does. The units are different as well. You're starting out in your early ages, you've got kind of more basic material, bronze and everything. And as you get down into the late ages, you start working with iron and steel. And it's just interesting how they've laid it all out to the point where you can play an early game and then go into a late age game, and they could be almost 2 completely different games.
I guess that's one thing that I would also say. The game doesn't appear to have like too much balancing done. So there are like, they just threw so much into the game that I'm not even sure how they would go about balancing it. But there's definitely nations with very significantly stronger units than other nations. So maybe that's one other thing. But I don't think the people who play the game are so like friendly about it that it doesn't seem to be abused too often.
Yes, there was a post on the Reddit forum someone posted a video of them doing like a raised skeleton type of a deal, which was pretty crazy. I don't know if any of you saw that. It's like raised dead kind of skill and just slaughtered the battlefield. It was quite interesting, actually.
Yeah, I actually love stuff like that. Actually, for the series we're playing, I'm playing the Middle Age Airmore, which is the Ashen Empire. Basically, Early Age Airmore is sort of like the Roman Empire, or the equivalent of the Roman Empire. But over time, the Empire, the mages in the Empire start practicing with dark arts, and then as the game progresses into the Middle Age game, the Airmore Empire becomes the Ashen Empire, and it's actually just legions of undead, where basically the mages had meddled too deep into the dark arts, and they've pretty much damned the entire population. And I think that's absolutely awesome, just completely rolling over your enemies with legions of undead units.
Yeah, speaking of balance, about that.
Yeah, that's the big thing. A lot of people don't like Middle Age Airmore because the balance isn't there. But I do got to say that in a multiplayer game, I can almost guarantee that anybody that most of the time Middle Age Airmore is actually banned from multiplayer servers. But when you do get the chance to play Middle Age Airmore in a multiplayer game, you pretty much get steamrolled by everybody who wants to take you out as quick as possible, because Middle Age Airmore completely destroys every land that they conquer, eventually just turns it to a barren wasteland, and they also leech off the dominion of nations that surround you. So it's just usually an easy target for everybody to kind of band together and gang up on. So it's going to be a lot of diplomatic decisions I've got to make.
Anybody been playing Warlock?
That's what I played a bunch of the original. I loved it in multiplayer, but I haven't really gotten into 2 yet, and I'm curious if anyone's played Warlock 2 and liked it.
I have, and I really like it, and I think it's really cool to see Dastastic, whatever he's calling himself now, the Australian 4X player, and he's got a new series, Warlock 2, which has a really cool mod that it's actually a almost like an all-encompassing mod of 3 new races, I think, and a bunch of other stuff, like just a crap ton of units, and there's just so much new stuff that it's almost like a sequel in and of itself. But he's playing a Let's Play of it now, and I think it's a great Let's Play, and it really kind of shows off some of the great things of Warlock 2. I personally think it's one of the underdogs. I only played maybe 30 hours of it, but I really enjoyed my 30 hours, and with the Let's Play that's going on, it really kind of made me itch to get back. So if you guys haven't checked out Warlock 2, I would definitely check it out.
Well, if you have a little bit of praise to say about it, then Orcas, what kept you from only playing 30 hours then? I mean, 30 hours is a lot, don't get me wrong, but compared to other games you might have spent more time in.
I don't have a good answer for that. I think it's just because of when it came out. It came out right around Endless Legend, and Endless Legend consumed me. So I think it came out maybe a few weeks before Endless Legend did, and I played it while I was waiting for it. And then once Endless Legend came out, I've sort of sucked into that. And then there's been a pretty steady stream of 4X games since then. And I'm one of those people that really don't stick to a 4X game, or any game for that matter, for too long. And with all the new ones, all the new shinies, I keep going to the new shiny stuff.
Yeah, that seems to be my problem as well. I have Warlock 2 and the Renaissance mod installed, and I've never got around to playing it because, too much shiny stuff getting in the way.
So cool. I think we've done a really good job of, unless anyone else has anything, and I'm forgetting it, but I think we've done a really good job of sort of looking over what the last couple of years have provided in the realm of 4X games. And now I think it would be an awesome opportunity to kind of take a look at what maybe our least favorite or biggest disappointment in 4X games have been for the last couple of years. And I think we should start with you, Combat Wombat.
Can we shit on Beyond Earth some more?
Of course.
That tops the list for me. I built up a lot of hope for that game, and I knew it wasn't going to be the kind of game that I was hoping it would be, a true sequel. But I thought it would be more than just Civ 5 in space, and it wasn't, and that hurt a lot, deep in my heart.
I guess another one we haven't mentioned yet might be Star Drive 2.
Yeah, let's go down the list, and if we're going to go down that list, that is mine, actually. Star Drive 2 or Galactic Civilizations 3. It's kind of funny because I guess through the subreddit I haven't really shat on Galactic Civilizations 3 as much as I do everywhere else. But both of them, I mean, if Star Drive 2, for the sole reason being that I saw so much potential, and it just, I mean, with Zero being who he is, he just ditched it. And there was this, like, this taste of something beautiful, and with him walking away from it before it was finished, I really feel like that was a huge disappointment. And then Galactic Civilizations 3 coming off Galactic Civilizations 2 with the Twilight. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be what GalCiv 2 was with both the expansions, but I just thought it would be somewhere close to how great those two games were. And I thought Galactic Civilizations 3 was such a retread and played it so safe that I would consider it one of the biggest disappointments of all of my gaming.
Yeah, for me, I think Star Drive 2, Master Ryan, the new Master Ryan does this too, that turn-based strategic, real-time, tactical just drives me a little bananas. The new Master Ryan did it better. The Star Drive 2 wasn't great, but what absolutely murdered Star Drive 2 for me was that the forced tactical ground combat was I just refused to play the game once I got to those forced quests where you have to do the combat and it takes forever and it is unengaging and painful.
Trexie?
Oh, come on, you must know. Sword in the Stars 2. Yeah, just bar humbug.
Sabouts?
Boy, my least favorite disappointment. I don't want to go Beyond Earth because it was already mentioned. So I guess I'll have to go with what game am I thinking? Star Drive 1. Actually, I want to mention Star Drive 1 because Star Drive 1 doesn't get a lot of the same attention as Star Drive 2 did, mainly because it was just completely outright abandoned. I think Star Drive 1 actually had a lot of potential. I think it had more potential than Star Drive 2 had. So to see him just completely abandon that project when I think it really actually had a lot there for it. I know that there's a group of people right now working on a mod to try to actually fix and improve the game and take it to where it needs to go. But Star Drive 1 just didn't do it for me.
Yeah, you've played, you've done a couple videos on Black Box, right, for Star Drive?
I did, yeah. I did a series on the Black Box mod, and I'll tell you what, it does definitely take Star Drive 1 where it needs to be, and I know they're still working on it with current improvements. It's going to get better and better, but Star Drive 1 without the mod was just a horrible disappointment.
Strat?
Well, I think it would have to be Beyond Earth again, and it's. I haven't played either of the Star Drive games, so I can't speak about that. And that there's other games that have been mentioned that I haven't played yet. The Galactic Civilizations, I played the demo of the first game when that was new, and I didn't really like it. So I can't be disappointed about Galactic Civilization 3. Like, it's got to be Beyond Earth again.
Tortuga.
Yeah, I'm also gonna have to beat up on another one we already mentioned. I would also say Galactic Civilizations 3 was I don't even think the game is terrible, but I guess it was just really disappointing because you had such big shoes to fill with this Galactic Civilizations 2, which was so complete when you had everything going. So that's what I would say for the most disappointing was Galactic Civilization 3, and I hope that the latest content release, maybe Orcas will speak a little about this, will hopefully improve it.
I want to add how comes no one's mentioned Civ 6? Is it simply because no one bothered buying it, or?
I would be number 3 for me, honestly. I've played 8 hours of Civilization 6, and I can't bring myself to play more. And it's exacerbated by the fact that I subscribe to the subreddit for Civ, and all I see are the memes about how awful, like, warmongering and all those stupid things that just drive me insane about Civilization 6. So I have no desire to go back until that stuff's fixed.
I actually love Civ 6. It does have those issues, but it's in a better state than Civ 5 was at release, and people absolutely shat on Civ 5 And right now, like you still have the hardcore of players that still stick with Civ 4, but Civ 5 is the sort of default Civ now that everybody acknowledges as is really good. And I think that once the issues are smoothed out with Civ 6 and maybe the major expansion or two, I think it'll be a lot better. So even in the state it's in right now, I do quite like it. Yeah.
Oh, I kind of have maybe this is another topic for another time, though. I kind of have a question about how you even go from like a series that's already been 5 in. You know, we have these like NBA, NHL type games where there's just every year they have they spit out a new one. When you have a game which is just as well polished as Civilization 5 was, how do you even go into a Civilization 6? Like, how can you possibly even impress people? Especially because I think that the base game is so entertaining that obviously it's a big risk to move away from it, but it's so fun as it is that you almost shouldn't move away from it. I don't know what you would say about that.
Right, just give it a facelift and call it Civilization 2016.
Yeah, well, right.
They kind of like, what they did with Civ 5 is like up to Civ 4, they just the Civ formula just grew by accretion basically, and Civ 4 with Beyond the Sword, the third expansion, it was really good, and it's still like you still have people holding it up as the best Civ ever, like I said. But with Civ 5, they decided to just wipe everything away and start from scratch, basically. So start with the 1 unit per turn, hex-based map, and completely just rebuild it from the ground up. And that's how we got things like the whole new system with the policies and with building your own religion that actually has functional elements in it, and that's at launch Civ 5 was pretty much empty because they mashed on that reset button, and so they mashed it again in Civ 6, but not as hard.
Yeah, I think we could talk a lot about that, and so we should probably save that for a future episode. What I'd really like to do before we head on to, well, I guess head into our exit here, is answer the age-old question, and this is a question that I see asked all the time on the 4X subreddit, and that is, what 4X game would you recommend to... Well, actually, what 4X would you recommend in general? Just either whether it's just modern 4X and what games should we get into because I'm new to 4X, or what 4X am I not thinking about right now? So Combat, if you could just tell me, like, what 4X would you recommend is just your go-to 4X game?
For a new player or a veteran or anything, Civilization 4. I mean, perfect game.
Boom. Yeah, my current recommendation for anyone who's trying to get into 4X would be Master of Orion, the reboot. I feel like it's really hit the nail on the head with introducing new people to the 4X genre. Drexy?
Well, I don't have new players with it, but definitely Distant World is... I think he does so much things right in that game, apart from the UI. But yeah, I'm a bit of a masochist, so I'd force them to play Distant World.
I think that means you're a sadist, actually. Kirkus?
If we're going for new players, I have to agree that Civ 4 is just a perfect game. I'm actually trying to get my girlfriend into it, so how that goes. But if we're talking about veterans who are kind of sick of the same old, I happily recommend Star Ruler 2.
Yep, I gotta say then if we're gonna do, I guess I'll split it up as well. If I was recommending a newer person just getting into 4X, I'm gonna say the new Master of Orion is actually pretty comfortable to get into as a new person entering the 4X genre, especially with the 5X Ultimate Balance mod that's just been recently released for the game and fixes a lot of the things that the developers left behind. But for a veteran, I gotta say that if you're a veteran looking for a real tough game to get into with a lot of depth, Distant World's Universe is definitely my 4X game to go to.
Well, if for a new player, I think Civ 5 actually, because over 4, because it's Well, you could argue about which one's better, but I think Civ 5 presents a lot of things more clearly. So I think it's easier to get into. Or in terms of space-based, well, I haven't played the new Master of Orion, but Stars in Shadow probably, because it's also it presents everything in a simple, easy to understand way without sacrificing depth. So for someone completely new, I think Civ 5 or Stars in Shadow.
Okay, so for new players, I'm going to go a little on the risky side, and I might even recommend Stellaris, because I know that Paradox was coming out. They weren't doing the 4X game itself anyway, so they're kind of coming in new themselves. So they probably have, I'm imagining, I've been playing 4X for long enough that I don't know, but maybe they did a good job helping people transition into the 4X field. And for veterans, I would probably say Distant Worlds, but even if, since that's been voted on enough, maybe even Aurora 4X, because that is just a fantastic game.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and say between Civ 5 and Stellaris, because those two games I see people on my Steam's friends list who don't play 4X playing a shit ton of, so yeah.
Yeah, shout out to Stellaris. And for veterans, Aurora 4X, definitely, yeah. It's just so worth it to at least try it out.
Awesome. Well, all right. I guess that wraps it up for this 4X Gaming podcast. Hope everybody enjoyed it. The topic of the games that came out in the last couple of years with a heavy emphasis on land. I guess if you guys got any suggestions for future topics, please let us know on Reddit, or you can get a hold of any of us. We're well receptive to any feedback or topics that you guys would like to hear. As well as any suggestions for the actual quality of the podcast. So this will be coming out every few weeks on the 4X Gaming subreddit. And I want to thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.